vote. Mark Lipsy, who is co-chair of the Environmental Committee, will be host for tonight. And Congregation of Agudath Israel's Environmental Committee is grateful for the encouragement and support of our synagogue and of having been designated a Seal of Sustainability congregation by Hazon. We are proud that United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism is co-sponsoring our program tonight, and we are committed to our work to educate and take actions to support, protect, and sustaining our environment. We so much appreciate that each of you on tonight's Zoom are attending this Earth Day commemoration, and we hope you also will leave with knowledge of what is happening to convert Jewish teachings into actions to protect and sustain the environment, and will want to join in this important mitzvah. Our congregation's senior rabbi, Ari Lucas, will offer the welcome. Dana Weiner, the vice president of the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, is going to offer greetings from the USCJ. I will provide introductions for our guests. Jakir Manela, who is CEO of Adamah, which is the successor organization to Hazon and Pearlstone. And he is founder of the New Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. And the closure will be offered by our member, Rabbi David Saltzman. So I'm very honored to introduce to you Rabbi Lucas, who will offer a welcome to each of you, congregants and guests.
Thank you, Harriet. Welcome to everyone. Bruchim habaim. Welcome. I am honored to open this program together with you. I just want to say thank you to Harriet for all the work you do in organizing programs like this one, and specifically for organizing this one. Thank you to Mark for all your efforts. The Environmental Committee at Congregation of Agudath Israel is a force to be reckoned with. It's really an honor to be part of this program. Welcome to our guest, our honored guest who's speaking to us tonight. And welcome to each and every one of you who have made time in your Passover holiday to learn more and to become more aware and more engaged in this issue, which affects us all. I'm going to give my sermon from the second day of Yantif in 30 seconds or less. Do you think I can do it? Let's see. And many of you are wondering, why didn't you give it in 30 seconds on the second day of Yantif? The sermon was right before Passover, when we make a verbal declaration nullifying all of our leaven products. We've cleaned everything, but if anything's left over, we say, whatever is left, may it be hefker ka'afra da'ara, may it be ownerless like the dust of the earth. And the lesson there is that the earth does not belong to us. We use it as a metaphor for the things that are in our possession, which we want to rid ourselves of. We say it's ownerless, just like the dust of the earth. But tonight I want us to remember that the dust of the earth does not belong to us, that the earth itself is not ours to own or master or conquer, but we belong to it, and we are responsible to it. So thank you, Harriet, for this opportunity. Welcome to everyone. I'm honored that our synagogue is so involved and leading on this issue.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Lucas. And I'd like to introduce Dana Weiner, the vice president of the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. We're very happy that you're here. We're really honored that United Synagogue, which encompasses 600 congregations in North America, is co-sponsoring this with us tonight.
Thank you, Harriet, and welcome everyone. USCJ is delighted to be part of this Earth Day program with Agudath Israel and Adamah. The Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition has been a really wonderful way to mobilize participation among Jewish organizations, and USCJ is proud to be a founding partner and to have adopted the Climate Action Plan to guide our work. And we're especially proud that many of the USCJ affiliated congregations have chosen to be part of the coalition, including Agudath Israel. So thank you for being a model to other congregations. I'd like to ride on the rabbi's coattail for just a moment and share a few words of Torah, if you'll indulge me. And this is inspired by an article that was recently posted in Exploring Judaism. So side note, if you haven't yet heard of it, exploringjudaism.org is the new digital home for conservative Masorti Judaism, and it has information about holidays, life cycle events, Torah, etc. In an article posted by Yaira Robinson, she explores the themes of Pesach as it relates to climate change. As we know, the Israelites didn't have much time to flee Egypt. They just had to grab the few clothes and household items that they could. Today, we're unfortunately seeing this occur more frequently due to climate disruption, as our neighbors around the world quickly flee their homes from disasters like hurricanes and wildfires. Sometimes they're able to return to their homes, and sometimes their homes become uninhabitable and they become refugees, much like we were when we quickly left Egypt. So as a kavanah for this season of redemption, let's consider how we can support those around us who are impacted by the climate crisis and commit to doing our part to prevent these disasters from occurring so frequently. Having this conversation tonight is a really great step in that direction. So I want to again thank Agudath Israel and Adamah for making this learning opportunity available, not just to your community, but to congregations across North America. And thank you to all of you who are joining us this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Dana. It's my privilege now to introduce our speaker. And because we are going to end at 9, we discussed the fact that I'm just going to make this very brief, although there is so much more I could say about Jakir Manela. He currently is the CEO of Adamah, the newly merged entity of Hazon and Pearlstone that were leading Jewish environmental organizations previously. Leading the new Adamah entity into a new chapter of growth and impact, he was the visionary founder of the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition, of which Congregation of Agudath Israel is very proud to be a member, although we may be one of the smallest of the entities. Adamah, along with 20 founding partners who represent major umbrella organizations of Jewish life, are committing to confronting the moral urgency of the climate crisis and jointly committing to climate action. And when I first approached Jakir Manela, he probably was just beginning his role, and it is only recently, maybe a few weeks ago, that the name of the combined entity of Adamah was announced. And we felt that having him speak to us tonight will help us to understand what changes will be able to take place now that Adamah is a larger entity, and now that so many of the largest Jewish entities in North America are part of this. This includes the Orthodox community, the conservative community, the Reform community, the Federations of North America, the JCCs of North America, et cetera, et cetera. And because he wants to have a chance to hear what you have to say and what questions you have, he will speak for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we will open it up to your questions. So, Jakir, I had this morning, I told you what my question would be. So, because I want to know what the actions will be that we're going to get to, and maybe some that are already taking place. So it's really an honor to have you come. You have such a busy schedule, traveling all over the world, meeting with so many people, and we're very appreciative that you are joining us tonight to observe 2023 Earth Day.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you, Mark, Rabbi Lucas, Rabbi Dana, everyone here. Good Moed, Chag Sameach, Happy Pesach, and happy pre-Earth Day. It's an honor to be here, and really excited to be here with Mark, host, and getting to speak with you and Harriet about this congregation and your work has really been a pleasure. And I also want to say before I jump in that I have a mentor and an elder on the call tonight, Ted Eisenberg. You know, I've been in this movement now for 20 years, and I started as a college student in Madison, Wisconsin, and had the good fortune to, through that work as a Jewish environmental educator and activist on campus, that prior to Adamah and Hazon was really the leading national Jewish environmental organization, COJL, and had the honor to serve on the national board of directors with Ted. And Ted, I just want to say to you that I learned so much from you. You were treasurer at the time, and you know, as a role model of what it means to be a mensch, what it means to be a Jewish leader, and to lean into issues that not everybody is ready to. All Jewish communities are ready to see, you know, our obligation and role to play. And it's just great to be here with you tonight and to be here with everybody. So thank you all for taking this time. I'm really excited to share, where we are at as a movement, as an organization, and really looking forward to your questions and comments and to make this a great evening together. Sound good, everybody? All right. So I'm going to share a few slides of video about the coalition that Harriet mentioned. And please, if you have questions, either shoot them in the chat, maybe to Mark as host, or to just a chat to everyone. And I'm excited to make this a conversation. Feel free to interrupt me as I go. But just to jump in here. So Adamah, this organization that is now the merger of the two largest Jewish environmental organizations, prior, Pearlstone and Chazon. Our mission is to cultivate vibrant Jewish life and deep connection with the earth. And we do that by catalyzing culture change and systemic change in 3 key areas: Jewish environmental education, climate action, and immersive retreats and community building. And as we think about this work, I actually want to weave it into Pesach, since we are here on this holiday. This is an interesting image I found online, but the verse is a famous one, right? And as we think about this like sort of iconic archetypal understanding of Jewish history and who we are as wandering, and particularly as that's anchored in the Passover story, I also want to ground it in what's happening now. And Rabbi Weiner, you spoke about this as well, or it sounds like Yair Robinson wrote about it in that wonderful online resource. I'm looking forward to looking at it. But we see now, this is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that there are absolutely exponential increases, particularly in highly vulnerable regions, to the threats that people are experiencing through climate disasters, and that there are now 100 million displaced people, with climate disasters displacing many more than conflicts. And so our tradition of our own story around wandering, around what it means to be strangers in a strange land, gives us a proximity to understanding, to resonance, to empathy, to what an unprecedented number of human beings and communities are going through now and will be going through in the decades to come. What does that mean for our understanding of Pesach, not just as a once a year storytelling experience, but as a paradigm and a framework through which we should look at climate refugees and the refugee crisis we have today? And not just all over the world, but particularly in the Middle East. I think this is, in my experience, one of the great blind spots in American Jewish life, that there's such a commitment to Israel's security and thriving future, and not nearly enough conversation of how climate already is impacting all areas of life, not according to me or Adamah, but according to Israel's own Ministry of Environmental Protection, imperiling the Middle Eastern region's freshwater, coastlines, infrastructure, and like everywhere else in the world, vulnerable populations are disproportionately harmed. I was in Southern California recently, speaking to a group of high schoolers, and the simplest way we can just understand and make very clear and concrete why it is so true that vulnerable populations are so adversely and acutely impacted is just think about the unhoused, right? And a lack of housing combined with heat waves and droughts and floods and hurricanes means these populations will be exponentially more harmed. And that is happening in the Middle East. It's happening in Israel, which is a particularly strong economy and has the ability to be not completely resilient, but more resilient than many other countries in the world, but not entirely immune from these impacts. And the surrounding region is certainly volatile geopolitically. I'm sure I don't have to go into depth on that issue during times like these. So how does this affect Israel? How does this affect the Middle East? That's why it's the UN climate conferences that I've attended the last few years. Last year was in Egypt, and this year is in the United Arab Emirates, because after the Arctic, which is the most sensitive region on the planet to climate, the Middle East is the second most region. And the big difference between the Middle East and the Arctic is density of population, right? And the geopolitical threat multipliers that climate sort of multiplies as all these issues sort of compound. So when we think about, the fundamental story and experience that our people tell during this time of year, and the experience of slavery and the experience of oppression, I want to challenge us to really look at our lives today and understand the oppression and injustice and climate, the issue of climate justice, of how this is playing out in our lives today, how this is playing out on a global scale, how those who are least responsible for climate change, those economies, those developing nations, are experiencing the impacts most acutely. And so what does it mean for us to see this as a justice issue? What does it mean for us to see the addiction, the economic dependency that the Western world and really the global economy has on fossil fuels as an existential and justice issue? Because as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us, these are direct quotes, we need ambitious accelerated action. We need deep and rapid emissions reductions across all sectors. This decade, or as we like to think about it, this Shemitah cycle, we think about 7-year cycles. The next Shemitah cycle that we're in now ends right on fall of 2029, going into 2030, by which time, as a planet, we need to have cut our emissions in half. And it's very much the consensus that those who can go faster than that must go faster than that, because clearly there are economies that and countries where that's going to not be possible, and folks will be on the slower side of the spectrum. So for those of us that are capable of getting to net zero and zero emissions this Shemitah cycle, we are obligated to do so. And there is a closing window of opportunity. And those kinds of remarks from scientists have a real impact, not just on our mental sort of experience, but on our emotional well-being, particularly for young people. Climate change anxiety this is from a study from NIH. This is a real diagnosed condition that shows up in the mental, emotional, behavioral sort of impairment of young people. And it's not only young Americans that this is impacting, young people all over the world and people of all ages all over the world, but it's particularly acute with young people. And we just need to understand this. And actually, one of the studies from NIH say that the best remedy that they've found to this is not for a high school or college student to say, I signed a petition, or I recycled a plastic bottle. It's when we participate in collective action, when we see ourselves as part of a circle and community, that we are together confronting this, and we see each other going through this scary time. We see the fear, we see the grief, and we move through it together. And the Jewish community has a powerful history and sort of spiritual capacity to see and walk through trauma and come out the other side. And that's really needed right now. And when you see all of that happening, I know this is maybe an amusing image from the movie, but I think one of the most confounding parts of the story, of the Passover story, and one of the most confounding parts of where we are in this moment in history is, how does Pharaoh's heart become hardened? How do our hearts become hardened, right? In this moment, even those of us who on a Monday night at 8:20 at night are here for this call, even our hearts, right, we become numb to all the challenges we face, let alone the millions of people, maybe even billions of people who find this more than they can bear to focus on, right? Overwhelming. I often talk about the ostrich syndrome, right? It's just, I can't deal with it. And if we really look it in the face, is it just too much for us? How do we face that? How do we move through that sort of paralysis to really activate greater change? And so the question becomes, how does change happen? And from here, I want to move from the Haggadah to one of my favorite rabbis, although he's not a rabbi and he's not a Jew. He's one of the founders of two of the largest environmental organizations in the world, environmental advocacy organizations. The guy's name is Gus Speth. And he said that, you know, he used to think the most important global environmental issues were really technical, right? Biodiversity, ecosystem collapse, and climate. And the ... there, he says, and I thought that 30 years of good science would solve it, but I was wrong. The top problems that we face are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. I have a friend who is a Jewish woman, leads an international NGO, secular climate organization. They do sustainable development around agriculture. And I went to COP27 in Egypt, the UN climate conference. She went to COP like 4 or 5, and she's been to all of them. And she told me that in the early years of the UN climate conferences, there were debates amongst the sort of economists and politicians who really were sort of on the top paragraph of this, that we just need to focus on the technical problems. But the philosophers and the faith leaders and the educators really saw this underlying moral, spiritual, cultural crisis. And that if we don't get at that lever, the change we need will not come. And now we're 20 years later, and it's not that the change isn't happening, it's happening, but there's a greater urgency, a greater pace, and a deeper level of change that's needed. So our work at Adamah is to really try to activate culture change that leads to systemic change, to really inspire and motivate people for this not to be about fear and grief and anxiety and sorrow, but about hope and love and community and change. Because we believe in the deep connection between Adam and Adamah, people and planet. I often say that if all we do is try to convey the message of our name, that Adam and Adamah, people and planet are one, we've done our job, right? We just have to make that truly real in Jewish life. So to do that, we try to inspire and empower people to feel that connection, to activate identity and community, and to work together towards a sustainable future, and to see ourselves in a multi-generational context, to feel our ancestors, to feel our descendants, and in that context, understand our responsibility to step into this moment with the full power, the full brilliance, resourcefulness, influence, everything we have as a Jewish people. We need it all right now. And so that's where our mission comes from, to pull all of that together to activate and cultivate vibrant Jewish life and deep connection with the earth through Jewish environmental education, climate action, and immersive retreats. So as the sort of leading Jewish environmental organization, we have a growing geographical footprint. We have 2 core campuses at Pearlstone and Isabella Friedman, one in Baltimore, one in New England. And we are establishing community impact hubs around the country where we're not trying to establish big campuses, but rather to put boots on the ground, staff, educators, and activists that lead Jewish environmental education programs and climate action initiatives around the country. We have a community impact hub in Detroit. We are launching one in Southern California, was just there recently. And we've just received some great support from UJA to launch Adamah NYC, and are really hoping to grow into other major Jewish communities around the country, including in the New Jersey area, and would love to continue conversation with this congregation and other leaders in the region to see if we can grow our impact there. So when you have a community impact hub, there are a few different pillars. The really strongest pillar is youth empowerment. How do we empower the next generation of Jewish leaders who are feeling that anxiety, looking for opportunities to step up and feel their sort of role in this moment? And this movement, the Jewish Youth Climate Movement, has started from nothing just a few years ago, started right before the pandemic. There are now over 50 chapters all over the country doing education, action, and community building. And I can tell you unequivocally, this is the best part of my job, being around these young people, and they are hope incarnate. They are so just inspiring to be alive in this moment, to see the science and what it's telling us, and to face it and to say, this is my life and this is our life, and we are going to work together to build a brighter future. And they have really, the teens have stepped up to make this happen. There are high schoolers leading. I'll talk a moment about college students. And I can tell you that a number of the teens that come to us come from secular climate justice organizations where they did not feel comfortable as Jews. Unfortunately, this is not constant or everywhere, but there has been enough of a pattern of anti-Zionism and some anti-Semitic incidents in the secular climate justice movement that young Jews who want to act on climate and didn't think to go to the Jewish community as a place where they could do that, go to a secular climate justice movement and then don't feel particularly welcome or comfortable. And again, that's not everywhere, but it's enough that we hear that as a real pattern. And some of the folks that come to the Jewish Youth Climate Movement have left the secular climate justice organization called Sunrise, the Sunrise Movement. And some stay involved and use the Jewish Youth Climate Movement as a place to like resource and feel seen and be whole in their Jewishness and in their love for the earth, to not have to choose between those things, and then to come back into multicultural climate movement space and represent Jewish perspective and come as a proud Jew and continue to participate in that work. And the founders of the Jewish Youth Climate Movement are now on campus. It's just a few years old, so like the oldest Jewish Youth Climate Movement elders are sophomores in college. They're incredible people, and we, when they graduated, we had a leadership board retreat at Pearlstone last summer, and they came to me and said, guess what, Jakir, we are starting a campus network because we are not done with this work. We are on college campuses now. We're not going to continue working with the high schoolers. It's a separate thing. So guess what? Let's do it. And it's an honor to follow their lead and follow their momentum. So one of the first things we did is we took the 10 leading Adamah campus leaders, took them to Egypt for COP27, the United Nations Climate Conference. And before that, we went to Israel, spent a few days in Israel with these American Jewish college students who may not have otherwise signed up for Birthright or another Israel experience, but went to Israel, met with young Israeli climate activists, traveled together as an American and Israeli group through Israel, looking at it through a climate and environmental lens, and then went to Egypt for COP27, which is just a tremendous experience. It's like 40,000 people from all over the world, every language, every sort of field of thought of thinking about climate and how we move forward. It was a tremendous experience, and now we are seeing campuses activated around the country, Adamah chapters, and Hillel's as a really important partner. So with that, I want to now share this video that talks about the coalition that we've launched. I'll share a few more, let's see, hold on one second. A few more slides after that. And then we will jump into conversation together.
Recent changes in the climate are unprecedented in thousands of years. It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change, making extreme climate events more frequent and severe.
The climate crisis is real, and it is here. Nearly 1/3 of Americans lived through a climate disaster last summer.
The impact does not affect all of us equally.
Those in our society with less power and fewer resources, already more vulnerable, are often hardest hit.
Jewish values compel us to confront this crisis,
and our commitment to Jewish community compels us to do so together.
Acknowledging the existential threat and moral urgency of the climate crisis, 20 national and international umbrella Jewish organizations have come together in our commitment to climate action, forming the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition.
Our coalition represents major Jewish organizations engaging millions of people of all ages and backgrounds across the world. Together, we recognize the urgency of the climate crisis and our obligation to do more.
We commit to climate action.
We commit to climate action.
We commit to climate action.
This winter, as we head into the first Tu B'Shvat of a new 7-year Shemitah cycle, we will release our climate action plans.
With commitments from each of our organizations.
We will continue to meet regularly and to report publicly on our activities, accomplishments, and commitments each year.
We invite Jewish organizations everywhere to join us.
Join us.
Sign on to the coalition and create your own climate action plan.
Our goal is for hundreds of Jewish organizations to participate so that we can take collective action on this critical issue.
We're here to support you in leading climate action in your Jewish community.
The Jewish people have a long history.
Our ancestors endured suffering and calamity, then rose to meet the next challenge.
It is our generation's imperative to confront this existential crisis together with communities across the world.
The 146 Jewish federations will share in this leadership with all of our partners.
Our children and grandchildren need us.
Our children and grandchildren need us.
Our children and our grandchildren need us.
So let's come together to take action.
All right. So just a few more slides to just spell out what that coalition really means. It is a big step for the movement to have these national umbrella Jewish organizations signed on, really almost none of whom have climate or sustainability in their mission or in their core values or in their core strategic plan, but all of whom, in speaking to the executive directors and leaders over the last year and a half, read the news, see what's happening, and understand that together we need to respond because this affects all of us. So what do we mean by climate action for not just these 20 founding partners, but now we have over 190 organizations that have signed on from all walks of Jewish life. What does it mean to take climate action? We see two main categories, getting to zero emissions and then expanding our impact through initiatives in areas that may not be easy to measure emissions, but are very, very important nonetheless. When we talk about reducing emissions, we think about renewable energy, electrifying things as much as possible, looking at offsets. We also think about reducing food waste, looking at transportation, a lot of ways to try to reduce our emissions as a community and institutions. And then in terms of expanding impact by working with Dayenu Interfaith Power and Light and a variety of other partners, how do we get involved in advocacy, thinking about our investment decisions, and doing the education and community building that make every step of this enhancement to Jewish life, an empowering thing for our communities. And you can't really measure when you make an investment decision differently, that lowers the congregation's emissions by this percentage in the same way that if you install solar panels, you clearly are getting to zero emissions, but it's all really important work. And we don't tell any institution, any coalition member organization, you have to do all of these things. You have to do, one from each category. We're here to provide a menu and to really provide support by providing consultation, office hours, communities of practice where congregations can learn from other congregations, Hillels can learn from other Hillels, federations learn from each other, JCCs learn from each other, and then resource guides, information about how to take action, webinars on solar, on switching fuels, on offsets, and we provide the financial support to get there. We're about to announce nationally, we have a national climate loan fund, we have a national climate action grant fund, and we're building local matching grant funds as well. The first one just launched in Orange County. And so I just want to close, back to the Passover story. There's a real sense that we, could be in this cataclysmic moment and feel this time, think about when the Israelites left Egypt. I often think about when they come through the Red Sea and they're out and they burst into song, and it's this great moment of redemption. That was also a moment where they were then on the cusp of 40 years of wandering, right? And I think there's a real question at this moment, how do we think about the culture change and systemic change we need? And does that feel like a wandering that is sort of aimless and without hope? Are we in exile? Or can we think about this as an opportunity to organize, to come together, and to actually move towards redemption? It's either way, it's going to be a journey. We have decades ahead. And the word for exile in Hebrew is golah, and the word for redemption is geulah. It's almost the same word in our tradition. I think Hebrew is so amazing in that way. And the fact that the only difference between these two words, between the idea of exile and the idea of redemption, is this letter, the aleph, this letter that means unity, that means spirit. That's so powerful yet silent, the beginning, right? The beginning of things. If we can bring that sense of unity, that sense of spirit, that sense of oneness to our communities and to this moment, to not run away, but to face it together, we can step into our responsibility as Jews, as Americans, and as human beings on this planet in this moment. It's great to be here with all of you. I'm excited for a conversation, looking forward to your questions. And again, I hope this brings us a sense of hope and optimism for Earth Day and for Chag HaAviv. It's not just Chag HaMatzah and Chag HaCherut, but it's also the springtime holiday. So thanks, everybody, and looking forward to your questions.
So I think Rabbi Hammerman had our first question. And I'll
first let's thank Jakir Manela. It was really, I think, really wonderful. Okay, so go ahead, Mark.
Rabbi Hammerman, why don't you ask your question? You'll have to unmute.
We don't see him, Mark.
Oh, sorry. I got the wrong rabbi. 1 second. I got Rabbi Saltzman. 1 second here. Let me see if I can find him to put him up. Here he is. I found him. 1 second. There we go. Here's Rabbi Hammerman. Rabbi Hammerman, are you unmuted? Okay, he's there. He goes. Oh, wait a minute. You're unmuted for just a second, Rabbi Hammerman. Try it again. Just one click. There we go.
I put a question into the chat. I'm sure it's not the most important question, but knowing, Jakir, that you can't do everything, where do you feel you should concentrate your efforts? On young people or older folks like ourselves? And as long as I'm unmuted, second question, do you have or have you had any experience with any congregation who have put electric charging facilities for cars in their parking lots?
Thank you. It's both important questions. Just on the second piece, I mean, just at Pearlstone, we've recently installed charging stations. I would have to ask our action team. I'm very confident that there are congregations across the country that have begun to do that and will be doing more. I think it's a great step to take and certainly support it. And it's one of the questions that our action team can support Congregation Agudath Israel's liaison to figure out what that looks like for you. To the first question, it is very true that there's a sense of urgency and a need to mobilize broadly and deeply, and limited resources, limited time. So where do we focus? It is the case that the Jewish environmental movement has had a really strong, sort of passionate base in young adults for many years. I myself was trained as a Teva educator, Jewish environmental outdoor educator, and as a young adult. And my wife, when I was doing that program at the Isabel Friedman Jewish Retreat Center in Connecticut, she was doing the Adamah farming fellowship program. There are now about 1,000 alumni of the Teva and Adamah programs that have gone on to become rabbis of every denomination, leaders of Jewish camps and day schools, Hillels, and really represent a very powerful new generation of Jewish leadership. And not only young adults post-college, but as I mentioned during my presentation, Adamah on campus is now growing onto college campuses themselves, and the Jewish Youth Climate Movement is in high school. So that sort of emerging young adulthood is the moment where we see young people really understanding the gravity of the situation we are in, and speaking up very powerfully, and really looking for support, emotional, spiritual, communal support as you face, a pretty scary situation. What's really fascinating is that we are now hearing not just from those folks, we're hearing from folks, kids in middle school, we're hearing from kids in elementary school. The age of awakening around how scary the climate crisis is, that age is becoming younger every year. And we now have young elementary school kids and their parents reaching out to us that are looking for support. So we see that whole range as a really important area of focus. And that said, the intergenerational conversation is a critical part of how we move forward. If we only talk to each other, 20-somethings or 30-somethings, technically in my 40s, I'm in my 40s, but if we only talk to each other, we're not going to get very far. And so something we're piloting with the Naples Federation in Florida is something we're calling the Malachi Project. Malachi, the book of Malachi, talks about the hearts of the parents turning towards their children and the hearts of the children turning towards their parents, and how that's a real sign of redemption. So we are running, we're going to be running a series of intergenerational climate Chavruta dialogue sessions between grandparents and grandchildren. The grandchildren will be like high school or college age, to really talk about what's happening, not just from a scientific perspective, but how does this feel to be a young person coming of age in this moment in time? What does that mean? How do we draw spiritual sustenance and strength during such a moment in history? And how do we look to our elders who have seen a lot, who have seen difficult times, who have seen the world go through trauma before? How do we learn from those times? And how do we try to draw strength together so we don't feel alone, not just within our generation, but across generations? So, Richard, to your question, I would say, yes, we are focusing on young people. And we think it is absolutely critical and an important part of our strategy to find ways to bring together all generations around this conversation. This is not only a young person's issue. This is a human issue. This is a communal issue. This is an issue for all of us.
Rabbi Hammerman, you're muted, but
I just said thank you.
okay, very good. Thank you for your question. We do have another question that was posted in the chat from Noah Friedman. Noah, do you want to ask the question on by unmuting yourself? And I don't know if you're able to go on camera, but whatever you feel comfortable with.
Thanks for putting me on the spot. But yes, my question was more about like how corporations are largely to contribute to a lot of the global emissions in the planet, especially like with like oil industry and just like transportation and travel, and like a lot of the emissions are due to commerce. Like, is there anything that we're doing to actually try and combat it on like a federal, like on a legislative level, or anything that actually will put like a huge impact in like global scale?
Thanks, Noah. It's a great question. There's a lot of different ways of calculating different sources of emissions, and they're all real. But just to name, this is one of them. I was just on a call today with an expert in transportation and energy, working specifically in New York. And she said the big statistic in New York is that 68% of emissions in New York City come from buildings, which obviously overlaps strongly, but is not entirely the same as corporations. So how do you tackle the building sector and construction and building operations? There's another conversation at the UN climate conferences that talks about food waste, that if food waste were a nation, it would be one of the largest emitters in the world. And so food waste as an issue is a huge source of this. And we often get, just to bring it a little bit closer to home, we often get a response from, in response to our work that says, like, what does it matter? The Jews are such a small percentage of the world. we could all wake up tomorrow and be, 100% solar and it wouldn't matter. And I'm here to tell you, you can calculate communal sort of aggregate carbon emissions, not exactly, but with some accuracy based on socioeconomic data, right? As incomes go up, sizes of houses tend to go up, cars, you tend to have more cars, there tends to be greater emissions. Based on those research points, we understand that the carbon footprint of the North American Jewish community, so leaving out the rest of diaspora and Israel, but the North American Jewish community has a larger carbon footprint than over 160 countries, not combined, not 160 countries combined, but we would be ranked as a significant emitter. So all that's just to say there are a lot of different sources, and obviously corporations, commerce, economy, businesses are a huge part of it. So I think you had, the question of how do you tackle that, and are there sort of policy levers we can pull? There's a few different ways to get at corporations and business and economy and policy. I mentioned in this presentation we were talking about you can lower your emissions as an institution, as a coalition member. You can also do expanding community impact initiatives. One of those is advocacy, and that could be federal climate policy, which we've just seen a huge piece of legislation come through with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act. And we work closely with our partners at Dayenu to support that, and Jewish Youth Climate Movement chapters and Adamah on campus leaders are very involved in political advocacy, getting out the vote work. And we also have quite a bit of experience, not only federally, because there's actually not as much federal climate legislation anticipated now that the Inflation Reduction Act has gone through. The sense that I understand is that it may be a few years before there's another round of efforts like that. I hope not, but that's what I have been told. So there's a lot of potential locally, and we work with local Jewish community public relations groups in Baltimore. It's the Baltimore Jewish Council, the New York Jewish Community Relations Council. There are JCRCs all over the country, and moving those entities from, in many instances, the sidelines on this issue to raising their voices as representatives of entire Jewish communities is a really important strategy that we look to make progress locally. And then there's another strategy, again, we work with our partners at Dayenu on this, to look at climate responsible investment. What if there are endowments at synagogues or JCCs or federations? Where are those endowments invested? Are they invested in fossil fuels, and could those be phased out? That's an important movement that's happening around the world with some success and certainly important potential. And then lastly, I'll say we are really interested in and have begun building relationships with Israeli climate tech leaders, Jewish leaders of green businesses. How do we harness the power of business, not just looking to sort of provide negative consequences, but how do we lift up the people that are actually making, there's a lot of money to be made as the entire economy is transitioned to a new way of being. How do we lift that up? How do we make connections between Israeli climate tech companies, North American green businesses run and where Jews are involved, create opportunities for rising stars, young people again on campus and high schoolers that are looking for internships? How do we celebrate the new green economy and try to really elevate can join the coalition too and release those climate action plans as well? So I think there's a lot that can happen here. Some of it is going to be sort of coercion and forcing things with policy, and that's an important part of the recipe, the formula. And part of it can really be about communal and culture change and celebrating the good that's happening there as well. I hope that helps, Noah, and be happy to talk more.
Okay, we have thank you, Noah, for that. We have two more questions coming in. One's from Max, and then we'll see if we can get Bob's question in as well. So Max, let me see if I can get you on screen here, and you can ask your question. Just give me 1 second here.
And Max Kleinman is the past CEO of our Metro West Jewish Federation.
Okay, go ahead, Max.
A great presentation. You know, we've been spending a lot of time on these macro issues. We're a congregation of Agudath Israel. Has Adamah developed a toolkit what individual synagogues and agencies and organizations can do to help drive us towards a greater global solution.
Thank you, Max. That's what this is all about, and I appreciate your leadership at Federation and here at the congregation as well. When congregations like CAI join the coalition, they're joining a community of practice, and that community of practice is specifically focused on congregational context. And there's actually two different communities of practice for congregations, because I'm sure, as everyone here understands, there are different size congregations, and a congregation with 100 members is very different than a congregation with 800 or 900 or 1,000 family memberships, because the facilities are different and the scale of what you can do might be different. So there are two different communities of practice. At each of those community of practice meetings, they're quarterly meetings, we're learning from everybody in the community. What are you doing? What's working well? How can we support each other? And then we're lifting up, what does solar look like at a congregation? What does food waste look like at a congregation? What is charging stations, transportation options? Looking at different toolkits and providing those toolkits, absolutely, for congregations, both in the community of practice, through the weekly office hours and consultation, and then literally information that we share with all coalition members on how to do this work. I will say, it is the variety, the landscape of regulations on solar in particular, renewable energy, is not the same all over the country. So we can give sort of general recommendations, and there are a lot of things that do apply everywhere, but there is some specificity needed to understand all the different rebates and opportunities to take advantage of federal funding plus state funding plus municipal funding. And that's part of our work, is to help everybody navigate that. But it's also why we are looking to create community impact hubs. The staff on the ground in Detroit or in LA or in New York City, or if we're fortunate enough to build staff capacity in New Jersey, will be able to figure out, here's what the specific regulations are in your area, and what does that mean for CAI or other congregations, in a way that is just more customized than the sort of national guidelines we provide. But we do have all that information, and our action team is built of real experts in this work that work closely with the coalition member organizations all across the country to make it real, to make it practical, and to make it happen year over year, because this is not just a one-time gig. Every year on Tu B'Shvat, all 190, I'm sure it'll be 200 organizations very soon, will be releasing our climate action plans and our climate action reports. What did we do this past year? What have we done, and what are we setting our sights to do in the coming year? And year over year throughout the Shemitah cycle, as a Jewish people, really understanding Tu B'Shvat not just to be the new year of the trees, but a new day of sort of Jewish communal reckoning with our relationship to and responsibility to the natural world, by really sharing what we've done and what we're going to commit to do in the year ahead. I hope that helps, and our action team will certainly be providing more concrete information to you and to the whole CAI community moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. We'll go on to Bob, and then
Will be the final question because of the timing.
Yes, exactly what I was about to say. So Bob, go ahead, and let's just try to make it quick.
Sure. Jakir, let me can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Jakir, let me thank you for compacting so much useful information into your presentation. Excellent. But I want to go back to a point of percentages. How much the Jews can make, a difference. I'm proud to be a member of the environmental committee under this umbrella of Jewish environmental movement. But roughly speaking, with all the Jews in the world, about 51% are in the US, and about 30 some odd make up Israel. And for the US Jewish population, 6 to 7 million or something like that, it's like 2%. My question is, how much of a difference can this Jewish environmental movement really have on the whole world? And two, are we integrating with any other organizations like the Christian community or the Muslim community? What have they done? And is there any interfaith programs going on?
A great question.
Strength in numbers.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. It's a great question, and it's a good question to close with, or just discussion to talk about. First, just to say, in terms of interfaith, absolutely. I'm part of a faith-based environmental CEO group that meets monthly. with representation from Christian, Muslim, there's a Buddhist organization, Hindu organization, and these are really wonderful relationships and growing partnerships. I spoke on an interfaith panel at COP27 in Egypt, and it's really a wonderful and powerful thing to be in community with faith leaders across the world on this. And I will say that the coalition that we've talked about tonight is a really interesting and compelling model to several of our colleagues, because it's really an architecture of mobilization that is not only just sort of broadcasting to see who's ready, but trying to leverage the national umbrella groups. Folks may find this surprising or not, but it turns out the Jewish community is particularly well organized. So not every faith community has that sort of network to tap into in such a comprehensive way, but it is being sort of noted and watched carefully as a model that could sort of grow beyond the community, as is the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. One of the things the Jewish environmental movement has done really uniquely well is culture change, is inspiring immersive experiences for young people, for families, for young adults, so that this is not just something we run away from because it's too painful and too hard. It's something we run to because there's meaning, there's hope, there's love, there's put your hands in the earth and grow, a garden and understand what it means to have a local community, a local economy, local food as part of the solution. And I think there's a lot of ways that our work is helpful in that regard, and a lot of things we are learning from others. And on that note, I guess I would also just say, it's not only faith communities that we can learn from, but our broader sort of just secular society. Every community, I shouldn't say every, but many, many municipalities around the country have climate action plans for your city, for your county, for your state. And for Jews to show up in those spaces as Jews, as Jewish leaders, and say, we want to know what the climate action plan is for Baltimore or West Essex or New York City. And we want to contribute to it. And we want to bring the information from that climate action plan back to our congregation, back to our federation, so that we can mobilize Jewish communities to help our city, our state, our country, our planet meet that climate action plan. Can be really powerful. So it's partnership with other faith communities, and it's partnership with the broader sort of municipal and governmental entities. And it's absolutely partnership with Israel. I mean, you mentioned 50% and then, the percentage of the Jews in Israel. It is a meaningful carbon footprint. It's not going to do it by itself. So, moving the Jewish people to a more sustainable place, but we have to be part of the solution. And we also have some influence, and, there will be ripple effects to what we do. And especially if we can link arms with the Jewish people all over the world, in Israel and across the diaspora. We often talk about Jewish peoplehood and planethood. I probably don't have to talk this month about the ways in which it might be harder than in the past, to find as many bridges to Israel for many people, and particularly for young people, that can be the case. But first of all, there still are many relationships and many things we can connect on, certainly around climate and sustainability. And this is an area that there really is not universal, but very broad agreement. That's really what the coalition is about. This is consensus now. This is fundamentally part of what it means to be Jewish in the 21st century, is to step into this responsibility and take it seriously. How do we mobilize the full power of the Jewish people in partnership with our brothers and sisters and cousins in Israel and across that diaspora to really activate this at scale? Just like one example of what that could look like. I don't know if folks here have heard of the Trillion Tree Initiative. Trillion. So it's not that we're going to plant a trillion trees, but in order to, nature-based solutions is the idea that we can't just put up solar panels all over the earth. That will not work. We need forests, we need farms, we need nature. And so we need to plant and or protect 1 trillion trees. The Jews are 0.02% of the human population, 0.2%, something like that. So that works out to something like 200 million trees. If you look at the fraction of a trillion, what would it mean for there to be a global Jewish peoplehood goal that we are going to mobilize towards a goal like that? What would it mean to unite around that, to unite around sustainability as a common goal for our future. So I think that's what this is about. I mean, it's about our responsibility, and it's about the opportunity for vibrant Jewish life and deep connection with the earth. And I hope everybody has a beautiful Earth Day and a beautiful Passover, and I look forward to staying in connection with everybody.
Well, thank you. For the sake of time, I don't expect you to answer now, but can you email us any good magazines or journals we could subscribe to that gives us the cutting edge of what's happening?
Sure,
sure. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to thank you so very much. I'm so glad that we took the time to pursue you and to get you to speak to us. I want to give you something to smile about too, because we are already involved with our local Caldwell, where our synagogue is located, Environmental Commission, and the Essex County Environmental Commission. They do have a plan for our town. They've asked us to be involved with it in terms of the flooding, stopping the flooding in the town. And so we are involved with that. And there are a number of other things that you mentioned. We're involved with Interfaith Group, so that the fact that Sisters Eleanor and Alice Ewell are here, that we've worked with them on a number of other programs for Earth Day and beyond. We want to do more. We learned that as a Seal of Sustainability committee, a community, we were no longer going to be filling out the forms for that, but I hear that we have to still submit our plans for the coming year, our goals, and then tell how we met them, just as we did before, and we are looking forward to doing that. And Lena Schuster, who is our synagogue administrator, is the official person who will follow up. So maybe we can speak to her about the charging stations that were brought up by Rabbi Hammerman at the beginning. But I'm very excited to have met you, and I'm very glad that we invited you to come. We hope that we'll have much more contact with Adamah and be able to participate in the actions of the Jewish leadership, climate leadership movement. Rabbi David Saltzman just wants to give a few remarks of closure. Rabbi Saltzman?
I think we summed up everything in the last few minutes, being the concept of global and local, and working on both things together. And though the challenge is great, like everything else, we've learned that you do what you can do and learn what's out there. And what we've just been presented with is a very good program that sounds so all-encompassing, but yet it was presented in a way that it seems that you could find your way into this and to move ahead. So thank you. And Yasher Koach and forward.
So folks, just one more item related to our local, and then we'll finish. We did get an email earlier today from the Caldwell Environmental Commission reminding us of a shredding event that's coming up on April 22nd. That's actually Shabbat. I know that I will not be encouraging people to shred on Shabbat. However, if you do have stuff that's shreddable, ask a neighbor if they can bring it over for you. I know I've done that before with electronic waste, and my neighbors were more than happy to help out with things like that. Speak to your local rabbi, I guess, on permissibility of having your neighbor do it for you on Shabbat. And there's also going to be a Zoom event on May 4th, planting for pollinators. So if you want more information on that, let me know. That's being sponsored by the Caldwell Environmental Commission. And with that, we'll say good night, Moed Tov, Hag Sameach, and hope to see you in shul in the upcoming days.
Thank you. If you're
Thank
not
you
yet
again,
member-
Yakir.
Bye.
If you're not yet a member of the environmental committee and you'd like to be part of all of this, we'd be very happy to welcome you.